So I thought I'd make a quick video about what's inside of a network attached storage device. We see them around, they're getting cheaper and cheaper for the consumer market, and really it's quite remarkable of how cheap they can get. So I'm going to take this apart and also just kind of explain, the in and outs of what a NAS is. So typically folks have something like this potentially. It's a hard drive enclosed in an external case. That way it's small, it's compact, and of course you can travel with it. And that's typically what you see here. Many brands, this is just one that I happen to have around. They typically connect these days by USB-C or USB 3.0. This is a 3.0. Now the benefits of this is it's nice because it's small, but typically when these small ones, they can't store as much data, right? So that being said, typically you want then something much larger. The other challenge with this is that there's only one hard drive in here. So if this is your only backup and it fails, it can become a challenge because you may have lost your data. And then lastly, compared to what you might want a NAS for, is this is only accessible when you connect it to a computer. Sure, there are ways to share this out to multiple systems on the network. If you have this connected to your computer, then you create a share. But that takes a lot of knowledge to some degree, but it also is a security concern. That's where a network attached storage device, there we go, might actually come in quite handy. So again, this is smaller, it's more compact, but it's only one hard drive in here. So there's no backup if anything happens. And, in terms of accessibility, it's kind of a per user or per department use if it's just very small. Many times, folks want something more like this. This is a network attached storage device. You can see automatically how much bigger it is, and it certainly is heavier. This one has two hard drives in it, or two hard drive bays, which we'll get to in a moment. But because it's got two hard drives, if it's configured correctly, RAID 1 in this case, which is mirroring back, which means whatever is on this hard drive is also on this hard drive. So if one fails, the other one still has the data. Whereas if this fails, your data is gone, at least on this backup. So that's really kind of the benefit. The other benefit is because these are larger, if you're not getting solid state, which makes sense from an economical standpoint, you get the standard hard drives, which we'll pull out in a moment, but they're much cheaper when you want to look at 6 terabyte or 10 terabyte versus a solid state, which can cost you several grand in today's marketplace. So network attached storage device. So you've got two hard drives. You can get these that you have even more. They can have 3 or 4 or 16. I've seen some of them that have 32 hard drives. So you can get really crazy, but we're just covering consumer market at this point. So in this case, the way that typically these are connected is on the network. So this one happens to have 2 connections, but sometimes they only have just one. So this connects on the network. It has its own IP. There's a small computer in here that actually connects to the network, grabs an IP, and then you can access the web interface on this device and configure it, right? Create folders, what backup you want. You could have this be your media folder. You could have this be just a standard storage folder or run automatic backups. A lot of different use cases you may have. This also has the ability to add a USB additionally to this. So interesting enough, you can add this little guy within the network attached storage device. Now, if this is accessible to multiple computers on the network, this will be too, because this will act as an extended share. And you can configure it depending on the software here, whether you want to back up this into this or not. But at any rate, it's just kind of an extra neat little feature that you may or may not want. So other things that some may have and that don't. So you can see here this has 2 network connections. It's meant more for redundancy. If one switch is bad or one wire is broken, however you have this configured, you could use the second one automatically. This also has 2 power supply options. Again, this is more of a robust one, but if your power supply in number 2 fails here, it'll just continue to use the number 1 unabated by the loss of power. So multiple ways you can configure it with UPS and network. So it's just up to you how you want that configured. On the front side, you can see that this has the ability to connect straight to a computer. Again, you could have this not on the network, but just to a computer. I believe that's what this is for here. And then you have the hard drive. So let's take a look at this hard drive. So for this type of brand, you push this lever up, and then this spring loads down, and then you have the hard drive. So here you can see that I've got a 6 terabyte hard drive. It's Western Digital. It's a lot of data, and that's what I was saying, is if you wanted to get a solid state that was 6 terabytes, you could, but it'd be incredibly expensive. So that's really where we're at here. 2 hard drives, and then they go in, and then here's the other hard drive bay if you wanted to see. And then the way that this is configured currently is if one hard drive fails, the other hard drive has the exact same copy of the data. So this system here maintains that consistency across to assure that the checksum is the same. So whatever's on bay 1, bay 2 automatically has. And that's completely configurable. So before I move any further, I've got to do one thing, because I do want to take this apart. That's what this video is about. But I got to make sure I put the hard drive in the right bay. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to remember. So one thing to note, that if you are going to use a type of network attached storage where you have multiple drives, one thing to import that's incredibly important is that the drives are all the same size. So if this is copying in 1 and 2, make sure that they're both 6 terabyte. I recommend that they're both the exact same brand, the exact same model number. That way you won't have any challenges. Sometimes you get hard drives that are slightly different size or different brand, and there may be some issues in copying the data. So it's best to make sure that they're all exactly the same. And if one fails, if this is configured right, it can even send you an email saying one drive fails. You pop the new one back in, and it works up and running, but make sure that new one is the exact same as the old one. So without further ado, let's take this apart. There's not really much to this. There's a small computer that, let me just move these over here. So there's a small computer in here because we know that it allows anyone to configure it. So that way it's on the network, and they configure how it wants to do backup or round robin network connection. So a lot of opportunity here to configure it to your heart's desire. Maybe you have it on a special VLAN if you're using it for a business, and so you want to make sure you have that additional security and configuration capability to it. So you're going to have a small computer. You're going to have some memory. I think when I logged in here a couple weeks ago, it was like a 1 gig. And you don't need that much. Again, it's not doing that much work. 90% of this is either reading or writing. So let's take this case off. Nothing fancy here, just steel case. All right, and it says date 5/15. Well, that's not very helpful. What's the year? All right, so not really much fancy. I am a little surprised at how big the networking board is in here. So let's go and open that up. So there's a typical fan in here, and I say typical because these tend to get warm if you're using them a lot. Not hot by any means, nothing to be too concerned about typically from heat, but they do tend to get warm, and so you'll have a fan running in there. If it's a decent quality one, expect it not to be very loud. Sometimes it may do a little work if it's crunching a lot of data. So if noise is a concern, for example, if you're wanting to back up audio or video or music in a production room, again, it's network. Put it anywhere you can put a network wire, and that should take care of that concern. And I think I can't remove this because these feet are holding this together. All right, that's what super glue is for. All right. There we go. So pretty neat, pretty smart design. You can actually see you've got the back plane here for the SATA and power connectors, and then that's using a riser card design to integrate into the main system. So pretty smart there, only because if this fails, it's easy to replace. And go. And let me do this. Let me put one hard drive in here just so you can kind of see what happens when a hard drive is inserted, right? How is this actually connecting to the main system? So this goes right here, and you can see you've got a nice design there. Just a simple rail, you know, it can't move around, it can only go all the way in. And then when this is being pushed in, you can see how that just glides right in there. Spring loaded. So you gotta, once you close this, there we go. There we go. So then that pushes that SATA connection right there. And nice. Pretty clever, right? So, you know, clever but old technology. Nothing really new or world-shattering there. Servers have been having that type of design for quite some time. Now let's take a look at the actual brains of this, because I'm just more curious on this. I was surprised to see an expandable memory slot. So we have the fan to keep it cool. We have the chips right here. These two. Oh, I don't know if you can see that clearly, but you have those two chips right there. They are to drive the 1 gigabit connections. Again, they're dual. And what I do actually find quite surprising, to be perfectly honest, is that there's an expandable memory slot. I mean, I'd be interested to see how much work you'd have to do to really use this, because there's a 1 built-in gig, and you can see the RAM is all right here. So this is your RAM that's built in. So you've got the chip. So if it's 1 gig, you can do the math, 1 divided by 8, and figure out how much that is. So that should be what, 128, 256, 512, 512. There's your 1 gig. So each one uses 128 gig. You have the riser connection here. This is where it was connecting to the other side of the unit here. Oh, I take it back. It was connecting here. This is for something else expandable. I'm not sure. Interesting. You have the standard CMOS battery because it remembers the time, the date, and all that information. USB 3.0. Integration, right, an extension slot. You got a couple of interesting reset buttons. You got one in the front and you got one in the back. One in the back is for a reset. I'm not sure what this is. This is probably to maybe power on the unit or power it off. You have the main north side bridge IC. That's what this is here, and you can hear that aluminum scraping with my finger across. That's just nice but effective heat sink to move that air through these panes and out through the exhaust. And of course, there is still a lot of power coming through here. I don't know, so it's 12 volt, but I don't know how many amps it is. My guess is probably 1.5 to 2 amps, maybe more because of the hard drives. But you can see you have the standard power controlling circuitry here, and that's separated as much as can be. Because it uses a wall wart, you don't obviously need a tremendous amount of noise and SNR and electrical cleaning before it enters the main circuitry. Typically you see like a gap between high voltage, but because it's using a wall wart, it comes in already at only 12 volts, which is good. So there's probably a little power conditioning, as you can see with this, but not a lot that you would imagine. So, you know, it's fairly predictable and basic. So overall, pretty neat. You've got a couple of chips here. I'm not sure specifically what they're for. This one is an ARM 8, so maybe I haven't looked it up yet. But if you're curious, so this might be the interface or what's helping drive some of the network connectivity. I do see some interesting things on here, though, that I would love to maybe spend some more time digging in. So I see a couple of J tags, but they're not soldered in place. So perhaps with this is maybe more programmable if someone has tried or has some time. Maybe that's where you can program some of these additional circuitry and remove the web interface and add your own web interface if you wanted a Unix or a Linux style. So that may be how they initially programmed it, which is pretty cool. So, you know, it's potentially hackable and reconfigurable maybe to a large extent. It's possible, and I don't know, maybe this is for added Wi-Fi. Again, I'm not sure why you'd want Wi-Fi on a NAS considering the speed, unless it was right next to the router, but maybe you could configure a Wi-Fi port here. I see some additional configurations that are possible, but the chips are missing. So, I'm speculating what they could be for. I'm not sure, maybe just older models as well. So overall, pretty solid design for something like this. Fairly impressive, just given that it's at the heart, fairly basic of what it does, right? One thing that is in this circuitry that is, again, critical is, as I mentioned, you've got 2 hard drives here. And that's the real benefit of using a network attached storage device, other than centralizing access, is because you can configure it, as I mentioned earlier. If one, you can configure it so that A, let's say, copies B. And you don't have to do anything there. You configure that in the software. You can also configure it if you didn't want to have a copy of both. You can also just as an expanded array. What this means is you could say, I want 6 terabytes plus 6 terabytes. And in that case, now my storage is expanded to 12 terabytes because this only has 2 bays. So if I said, I'm not worried about it failing, or maybe I'm worried about it and I got another way to back it up, right? Maybe this is one of 2 backups. Then conceivably you could have this be 12 gigs of data. 12 terabytes of data. It sounds like a lot of data, but this video alone that I'm making, it's probably 3 to 4 gigs. So go figure. So anyway, yeah, that's the in and outs of the NAS. Fairly straightforward. This one's a couple years old. There are a ton of them out there. If you're looking to buy a NAS, there's a couple things that I would say maybe look out for. The first is planning. Understand how much storage you actually need. If you need, if you're looking for a terabyte or 2 terabyte, might not be bad to get 1 or 2 more. I would say 50% more than what you think, just in case as you increase storage. As I said, anything today is just more data, right? Everything's recorded now in 4K and sound is better. So, consider storage, consider how long you're going to have this. This NAS is 4 or 5 years old. So if I needed to use 2 terabytes to back up, I'm not going to just get 2 terabytes, because if I've had it for 4 years, I will double the data. And in fact, this is entirely full. I've only got 23 gigs of data left on there. So go figure. Good thing I, allotted for that additional storage capacity. Didn't need it earlier on, but certainly as I go more, I'm like, I don't want to delete it. I don't want to delete my data. And so that affords me the opportunity. So the thinking about not what you need it for today, but how much storage you need in the future. And again, just look at how long it took you to collect your data, or maybe you have a new project. Do some research on how large files may be and adjust accordingly. I typically go about 50% larger than what I think I need. It's nice. I don't have to worry about being as vigilant in saving space, but you just never know. The other thing to consider with a network attached storage is how you're going to actually attach it. You're going to connect it to your computer. In this case, it has a built-in USB, or you're going to connect it to the network. You might think that it's nice to connect it to your computer, but if you think that you'll more than one person, or you have a need for more than one person that will need to use the network attached storage, then I would absolutely think about changing that up and getting one that has the capability to connect via the network. It becomes not only nice because you have that central management, but you can also have that additional security built on there. If you're looking for later on your personal network or a corporate network, if you want to use these for business and have that capability, then it obviously makes a lot of sense that you may want that network expandability later on. Another thing to consider, and this is something that it's not as easy to review straight away, but it's really important, is take a look at how the software works on the actual network attached storage device. Right? This has built-in software that I access via an IP address. So I would highly recommend looking through, especially if you're not necessarily familiar with this technology, and read up on the reviews. When I look at reviews, I go to places like Walmart, Amazon. Because this is a device, I'll go to Newegg, a lot of different technology places, and read some of the reviews. I don't rely on just one place for reviews, because we know that they can be modified extensively to some, especially on some sites. So I tend to go to 4 or 5 different sites to get a good understanding of what some of the pros and cons are. But I will tell you, it becomes very helpful for me to understand whether it's a good device or not. And that's exactly where a lot of these benefits come from. So, go through, take a look at what's available online, and then do your research to see, is there other brands that maybe work better for that. The web interface, that's the way that the devices are configured. It becomes very important. To be honest, the web interface on this device gets a solid C+. It's not just slow. I've noticed, even with the latest firmware update, it can be a bit of a pain in the butt to really configure. Sometimes the text doesn't appear. Sometimes I'll have to wait 3 or 4 minutes for something to show up. Then I have to refresh the page, wait another 3 or 4 minutes. So once this is configured, once you have it configured, you don't need the web interface anymore. The data's there. You access it however you want to. But that initial setup can be kind of a pain. So if you don't want to struggle, go read some of the reviews, see what they say. If they say easy to configure, quick, it makes sense, or a lot of these softwares now walk you through. They say, what do you want to do? And they'll do the configuration of what RAID configuration you need. They'll give you an idea of how much storage you'll be able to have depending on the configuration, etc. So that's another thing you can do. Just take a look at what some of the reviews are and get a good understanding of what's out there. And the other thing that you might want to consider is brand. There are, to be honest, there are economical solutions out there. Almost put this in the wrong way. There are economical solutions out there that will absolutely help in getting what you want, but let's be clear, sometimes the economical solutions may give you a bang for your buck, but there is a cost to that. Sometimes the web interface isn't good. Sometimes the device is not reliable, and that can be frustrating. Sometimes it's not actually copying the data. So my recommendation, again, is if you do see a solution that seems, hey, it's fairly cheap, that's good. There's nothing wrong with that, but double check the reviews, go to 4 or 5 different sites, see, take your time, look at the positive, look at the 1, 2, and 3 star, and see, does it last. If this is a brand that's been out there for longer than 1.5 years, 2 years, and you're seeing good reviews, chances are it's going to be pretty solid. If you've never heard of the brand, or it seems fairly new, I would not hedge that bet. Remember, if you're really grabbing and you're going to pay for a network attached storage device, and it can be several $100s, then obviously you're going to want to make sure that it's appropriate for what you need. And again, you're spending the money. It's probably because you want to make sure your data is safe. So you're going to not care so much about how much money you saved if the thing fails and you've lost your data not because of the hard drive, but a configuration problem. So anyway, so took it apart, just kind of looked through. As I said, fairly basic, but quite interesting. And then, compared it to, your standard external portable hard drive. So interesting different benefits there. Thanks for watching. Bye.